Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dabo Swinney, the Clemson Tigers, working their way through fall camp. We're kind of getting to that point where we're starting to see some breakout players emerge. Obviously, Dabo Swinney got up in front of the media, gave us a lot of good insight into this Clemson program. Shout out to Dabo Swinney. I mean, he's a coach that is going to allow you to understand what's going on within the program in an era of college football where we have so many head coaches that are really close to the vest. And Dabo Swinney's going to let us know what's going on. So we got a lot to talk about in terms of how some position battles are shaking out, what players are going to emerge as difference makers for this Clemson program. Fired up to get into it. Before we do it, as always, just want to say one, to the Clemson fans, thank you. It's been a blast talking this program, whether we're talking recruiting, whether we're talking 2024, the amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas, that means the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, and I know dang well a lot of Clemson fans that are listening to this have read the fall camp notes, have listened to Dabo Swinney up in the press conference, would love to hear some of your biggest storylines, the players that are catching your eye coming out of fall camp. Fired up to get into this one. And let's start with a position group that I think was the most important position to kind of keep an eye on during fall camp. That is the wide receiver spot. Where you got to start is this team is healthy. And you could say that about the wide receiver room, but you could largely say this about most of this Clemson roster. And I'm not sure if a lot of casual college football fans appreciate the injuries that Clemson has had to deal with over the last couple of years, specifically in fall camp, where you look at these next 3 to 4 weeks being crucial in terms of building that chemistry and kind of putting together your team. The last couple of years, Clemson has been decimated with injuries during fall camp. The wide receiver position, most importantly. And I think last year, you go back to the struggles we saw with this passing attack in the 2023 year. I think a lot of them had to do with, one, you got a new starting quarterback in K. Klubnik. You got a new offensive coordinator in Garrett Riley. And then you just had, two healthy scholarship wide receivers that you were rolling through fall camp with. There was some explanations to why we saw this Clemson passing attack struggle in 2023. My biggest storyline is that all of these wide receivers are healthy and building that chemistry within this Garrett Riley offense, along with K. Klubnik. Now you start getting into the wide receiver room. As a social media scout that I am, I saw a clip of Adam Randall making a phenomenal football catch. Adam Randall is one of those, at least in my mind, one of the more fascinating players on this Clemson team, where he might be the most talented player in this wide receiver room. Now, can he stay healthy, put it together going into year 3? If we continue to see that kind of buzz from Adam Randall, that's a massive storyline for Clemson, because we are looking for some of these bigger-bodied wide receivers that can work vertically down the field emerge in this Clemson wide receiver room. Because you look at Antonio Williams and Tyler Brown, we ain't got no question marks about what they are going to be if they're healthy in 2024. But to really open up this offense, we need some more down the field presence. Adam Randall is probably the guy that you are looking at. Now, the two other wide receivers that we have to shout out are the true freshmen. Let's start with TJ Moore. This is a guy that, he wasn't in for spring ball, so we haven't really seen him until fall camp. You just take a look at the pictures from TJ Moore. He's going to be a guy that's going to be hard to keep off the field as a true freshman. Again, this Clemson wide receiver room is looking for a TJ Moore kind of player to come in and step up. I think TJ Moore is certainly going to play. And then shout out Brian Wesco. Comes into Clemson at 165 pounds. He's up to 182 pounds. He looks a little bit more put together heading into fall camp. You can kind of tell Brian Wesco has been a lot of hours, I guess you'd say, in the weight room, developing that physicality, which was kind of our biggest question mark about Brian Wesco. This kid is juiced up in terms of the speed, in terms of the twitchiness and the movement skills. The question was, could he deal with some of the physicality that he'll see at the line of scrimmage in the ACC? At 182 pounds, some of those problems start to get mitigated a little bit. So one of my biggest storylines for Clemson during the early days of fall camp is, one, these wide receivers healthy going into fall camp, but more importantly, they are starting to play some really good football. And I think that is one of the biggest storylines for this Clemson program, where, we highlighted it. 6.1 yards per pass attempt last year. That was 121st in the country. And Clemson's eyes are winning an ACC championship and making a run in the college football playoffs. That number in terms of yards per pass is not going to cut it. I expect it to significantly take that step, and to hear that the wide receivers are starting to put it together, probably the biggest storyline that we have early within this Clemson offense. I think the next player I want to talk about is at the tight end spot. We obviously have Jake Bringenstool, at least in my mind, one of the best, if not the best tight end in the ACC, one of Cade Klubnik's favorite targets. How about Christian Bentancur, the true freshman? This kid also sounds like he's going to be hard to keep off the field. Dabo Swinney described him as one of the most athletic football players that we have. He's a big functional athlete. That's a very fluid pass catcher. Can he deal with the physicality in terms of inline blocking? That's something we'll see as a true freshman, but I think there's a lot of excitement around the young tight end. And then finally, we got two more things to talk about on the offensive side of the football. That running back 2 position. And Dabo Swinney was very blunt with the media. Hey, Phil Maffa's our running back 1. I don't see any running back in this room pushing him for that quote-unquote running back 1 position within this Clemson offense. That should not come as any surprise to the Clemson fans. That being said, the question mark that we had was, who's going to be running back 2? And you make no mistake about it, Phil Maffa is going to get the lion's share of the workload, but you got to have a running back 2 that is dependable and can kind of step up to spell Phil Maffa. My biggest storyline, the guy that we said prior to fall camp even starting, I'm going to mess up his name, and I should get his name because I love this kid, David Izumne, the true freshman. He's up to 213 pounds. He runs a 10.8 coming out of high school in the 100-meter dash. I love this kid coming out of high school. He attacks the line of scrimmage, has that breakaway speed. And now that you're telling me he's one of the fastest football players on the field, and now he's up to 213 pounds, I mean, from a physicality standpoint, I saw a picture of him during fall camp. That looks like a Division I Power 5 running back as a true freshman. You wouldn't be surprised if he comes up and takes that running back 2 position going into 2024. You look at potentially a little bit of a thunder lightning kind of conversation where Phil Maffa is your bruiser. He's going to make you tackle him 20 to 25 times a game. Then you can put David in, who has that big play potential. I kind of like that running back room shakeout for Clemson on offense. And then you look at the offensive line. I've said it and I'll say it again. I think this offensive line can be really dang good in the 2024 year, assuming they stay healthy. Now, there's a couple of things that stand out. One, I think we have our starting tackles. I think we have our starting guards. You see in a center position battle between Ryan Linthicum and Harris Sewell. You kind of just assume that whoever wins that job is going to be a pretty darn good center. I think Harris Sewell is a very good football player. Ryan Linthicum, too. We haven't seen as much of Ryan Linthicum, but you look at Harris Sewell, there's a lot to be excited about in terms of what he brings to the table. And then one of the other fascinating conversations for this Clemson offensive line is you look at Colin Sadler. I think Colin Sadler is going to play a massive role in this Clemson offense in terms of being that 6th man off the bench. I think Colin Sadler is certainly good enough to be a starting 5 offensive lineman for Clemson, but to have a guy in Colin Sadler who can play both the guard spots, both the tackle spots, that's massive. Because you look when Clemson started suffering some injuries on the offensive line, which is kind of inevitable. Now, Clemson got it bad last year, but you were going to have some guys miss time on the offensive line. That is just how the sport of football works. Clemson didn't really have the depth, right? They were already playing guys like Mitchell Mays, who they weren't good enough in 2023 to play. Colin Sadler being that 6th man gives Clemson that much needed depth on the offensive line that they need. And you look at Clemson, again, going back to their goals, we're expecting, Dabo Swinney says this, we're expecting to play 16 to 17 games in 2024 because we expect to make the ACC championship game. We expect to make the college football playoffs. You have to be deep along the line of scrimmage. I think Clemson is deep. They have a lot of continuity bringing back guys that have played a lot of football together. I would keep an eye on this Clemson offensive line as kind of one of those underrated storylines in a unit that I think can be pretty dang good in the ACC and quite frankly across the country. You go to the defensive side of the football, that we've been very vocal. I don't have many question marks about. Now, just highlighting a couple of guys that caught my eye. Peter Woods coming in at 319 pounds. Now, when I saw that number, I was like, we're still going to play him at edge at 319 pounds. Then I saw the picture of Peter Woods. He's about as lean as it gets. I mean, I haven't seen a kid carry 319 pounds as well as Peter Woods does. So from an athleticism standpoint, I still think he has that juice to play that edge spot. I expect them to move Peter Woods kind of around, play him at the 3 tech, play him at the 5. Man, does he look like he's going to dominate as an edge rusher. And you look at TJ Parker, Peter Woods, that is a very dynamic edge rushing group. You look on the inside, 2 guys I want to shout out. One, DeMonte Capehart. Sign us up. Like, sign me up for DeMonte Capehart, not just breaking out and being a really good football player for Clemson, because he's been that the last couple of years. Sign me up for DeMonte Capehart asserting himself as one of the best interior defensive linemen that we see in the country, a first-team All-ACC caliber guy. I think that's what the ceiling is for DeMonte Capehart. He's healthy. He's looking the best he has. I have my eyeballs on DeMonte Capehart. And then redshirt freshman Vic Burley, a guy that was the highest-ranked defensive lineman in that 2023 class for Clemson, obviously didn't play last year because of injury. He's up to, 332 pounds? I didn't get to see a picture of Vic Burley, so I don't know necessarily how he's carrying it. That is a big dog on the inside of the defensive line. He's still working his way back from injury. Just keep an eye on my guy Vic Burley on the inside of the Clemson defensive line, and then you go to the back end. It's one, the linebacker room is one of the better rooms that we see in the country, right? Barrett Carter and Wade Woodaz being some of my favorite linebackers. Obviously, freshman Sammy Brown. I ain't got no question marks about the linebacker room, more just how the rotation is going to work. Because, again, you look at Sammy Brown and say, we want to try to get that cat on the field during his freshman season. Then you look in the back end. It seems like they're healthy back there. And I think the biggest storyline for Clemson in the secondary is the continued chemistry that we're trying to build in the back end. You look at Clemson in that Kentucky game, I think individually you have a lot of really good football players, but you got some guys that they played a lot, but you just want to see that unit come together a little bit more, specifically in zone coverage where you're passing off zones, you're all on the same page. That's what got them burned a little bit against Kentucky. I expect that to get cleaned up as this group gets to play a lot during fall camp together. A lot of fascinating storylines. Again, we are probably going to primarily focus on K. Klubnik and what this passing attack looks like, because I look at the offensive line. I look at Phil Maffa. I think Clemson's going to be able to run the football. I think Clemson's going to play really good defense. How much more explosive can that passing attack be for Clemson in 2024? That kind of determines if Clemson's going to be an ACC champion and a dangerous team in the college football playoffs. That's what we're going to be looking for. We'll cut it there. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Would love to hear from y'all in the comments section. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.